All right, we got everybody here seated at the table. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see everybody again tonight. It's Party Central here as always. So this meeting now is called to order, the CRTPO meeting on February 15th, 2023. So first item that we have, any requests for any changes in the agenda? Seeing none, hearing none, then can I have a motion, please? So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Adopted agenda tonight. We'll go to the public comment period. First, we have two speakers ready to come up. You've got 3 minutes each on the speaking engagements. First one up. Maureen, is it Jalowski? Is that where? There we go. If you could please come up, and you really do have to get close to that microphone so you can stand off center a little bit closest to the mic, if you would. And just state your name, who you are, where you come from, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
No social security. So
See if I can rearrange here. Okay. Good evening, members of the board. I'm Maureen Gillespie, and I'm a board member of Charlotte East. Charlotte East is a volunteer community advocacy board, and our mission is actually to work with the community to support and develop the economic and social capital of these community. I also co-chair the transportation committee, and we actively support multimodal transportation, equity, economic development, and opportunities for economic mobility for our diverse East community. Albemarle Road, Highway 24, is a state road that serves transportation corridor connecting residents from Cabarrus to Stanley counties into Charlotte. Within the city limits, Albemarle Road is also home to an East Charlotte community of well-established 40-plus-year-old neighborhoods and small businesses. There's a large population of immigrants and refugees who reside in the many older apartments along in between Sharon Amity and Harris Boulevard. At Albemarle Road and Central, a 128-unit affordable housing project is under development. The old Eastland site is preparing to develop an 80-acre mixed-use site that also includes senior housing. And, as you know, affordable housing and safe alternative mobility options are crucial for social and economic mobility, especially for low-income households. Currently, Albemarle Road is heavily traveled with 37,000 vehicles per day, bumper to bumper at rush hours. It's challenging, and it's a hostile environment for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as motorists. It's no surprise that it is identified as a high-risk Vision Zero area. However, plans to widen this road will not improve community safety. There continues to be limited multimodal options and infrastructure investments for all ages and abilities for Albemarle Road and for many East communities. The bus-centric Connect Beyond Regional Transit Plan and Vision supports reliable transportation options to jobs, to education, medical service, to support equity, economic mobility, and sustainable energy solutions in Charlotte and the surrounding area. According to the Connect Beyond findings, between 2018 and 2045, the region will see a 56% increase in population, a 45% increase in households, and a 44% increase. The scope of work that you will consider for approval includes sidewalks, pedestrian hybrid beacon signals, intersection improvements, and bus stop relocations that are all a good start to addressing safety. Charlotte East hopes this is just the beginning for mobility options to help offset the financial burden of high regional transportation costs for low-income households. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, next up, I have Darren Crosby. You can, there you go. Thank you. Come on up and get close to the microphone as well so we can all hear you. Welcome. And just identify yourself, where you live, and if you're associated with in a group or organization or not.
Okay, my name is Darren Crosby. I'm a resident of West Charlotte. I live in the Pine Island Country Club community, which is off of Highway 27, also known as Mount Holly Road. I've come tonight to speak to a widening project that was scored. It was H17148, which is North Carolina 27, widening from Ryan Road to Bellmead. And we found out recently that it had been taken off of the sort of the current tip and is being pushed out. But we've had many rezoning petitions and approvals right on our road. You know, I can go through them, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rezoning projects that have went to multifamily, and it's currently a 2-lane road, and it's dangerous. We have gas trucks. We've had 2 gas trucks flip over. You know, I live in the golf course, and the creek sort of comes around the back of my house and the front of my house. So it was so bad when this gas truck flipped over that we had to leave our neighborhood. So it was that bad. But the tank farm uses Highway 27. When they come out to hit 485, they sometimes they'll use 485, but a lot of times they'll use 27 to go to Gaston County. And it's a recipe for disaster. It's currently 2 lanes. I think it's the only city adjacent to Charlotte that is served by 2 lanes. It's sort of scary, but we've had a lot of development in Gaston County. A lot of the commuters are going from Gaston County to 485 via Highway 27. Trying to get out of our neighborhood takes probably about 20 minutes, maybe longer in the evenings or in the mornings. So I just, you know, I've talked to Neil, I don't know where Neil's at, but we're trying to have it resubmitted in the summer for something coming up soon, hopefully. And I'm going to do a little bit more research so I can maybe send some information in to see what else we can do to try to get something funded for the road to be built or be widened. And, you know, a lot of the project right there, they're building a new intersection, and a lot of the developers are paying for the intersection improvements. The apartment complex at Ryan Road and 27 is paying $200,000 for the Ryan Road, Mount Holly Road, and Sonoma Valley Road intersection improvement. 221 apartments at 9900 Mount Holly Road is paying $50,000.
All right, we're out of time on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right,
All right. Well, I
Thank you.
appreciate
Appreciate
you letting me speak.
very good. Thank you very much. All right, next up, Pete Frandand, is that what it is? Nobody? Left the house? Oh, there he is. There you go. Sorry about that. Welcome, and you've got 3 minutes, and state your name and who you represent.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Pete Frandano, and I'm in the commercial real estate industry here in Charlotte. As you know, real estate and transportation are intertwined. Following Janet Labar's thoughtful remarks to your board last month, on behalf of the business community, I wanted to reinforce her call to action regarding the I-77 South Corridor. First, thank you to all of you. Well-deserved thank you for all the work that you did during COVID. We know that y'all kept working through projects during that time, so a big thank you to all of you. As you take action tonight and decide on how to respond to NCDOT regarding the I-77 South, I want to share a few thoughts. The Charlotte Alliance's report on the economic impact of mobility investments, which was studied by UNC Charlotte and NC State University, found that for every $100 million invested in Mecklenburg County's highways gives rise or yields 170 million to 270 million in total economic impact to our region. I'll just add that from my professional experience in the Fortune 500 world and our commercial real estate industry for the past 20 years, colleagues and clients of mine here and across our great state work with companies of all sizes that are hiring local employees. We know the capital allocation and investment has choices. They're evaluating markets for several key factors, some of which are cost of living, quality of life, accessibility, and transportation cuts across all of those factors. And historically has served Charlotte well in attracting and retaining business. We don't see net immigration stopping anytime soon in our region, and that's a great thing. The employment needs are here and now. Companies that are moving here are coming now. And if improving this stretch of a major corridor will help with employment, why not look at the delivery date from every angle and decrease the amount of time to get the process started? From what I understand, you're deciding on whether NCDOT should begin analyzing and comparing alternative mechanisms for I-77 South. Given the traditional timeline that's been discussed in previous meetings, we believe you have to get those answers. The corridor is too important, the benefits too great, the need is too real, and we need other options to assess in the future. Janet was not speaking with hyperbole. The business community is watching and listening. I know we will all agree that transportation is a critical component to our region, our communities, and our businesses. We either succeed or fall behind in the years ahead as we take care of our transportation needs. Business leaders are calling for creative solutions to this region's greatest problems. You have before you a great opportunity to make progress on a major transportation issue that needs to be addressed. I would urge you to act now to ensure that we all have the data and the options on the table as you continue discussions and evaluations of the I-77 South Corridor. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. We all appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those. You stayed within the 3 minutes. All right, next up, it looks like I have Manny Gonzalez. Is that correct? Welcome, sir. You just get up close to the microphone so we can all hear you. State your name. You got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Again, good evening. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important of our region's interstate system and its vital role in supporting travel and tourism. I am Manny Gonzalez, the Vice President General Manager of Carowinds Amusement Park, located in the North Carolina, South Carolina state line. As you probably know, Carowinds is the 400-acre home of top-rated roller coasters, the world's tallest and fastest giga coaster rides, attractions, live stage shows, as well as a water park. We host popular events such as Grand Carnival, Scarewinds, and Winterfest throughout the year. In addition to the park, we have a hotel and a campground accommodations on site. Carowinds is also a significant employer in our region, hiring thousands of seasonal workers each year and providing first jobs to many youth in our area. Carowinds is one of the most visited attractions in the Carolinas, attracting millions of guests annually, and drives tourism to the Charlotte region from all over the Southeast and the nation. Nearly all of our guests are likely to use I-77 during their visit to the park. As you drive south from Charlotte, you can see how close Carowinds is to I-77. The flow of traffic on the interstate directly impacts many of our guests' travel and schedules as they drive through the region. Ensuring that they have a safe, convenient, and predictable access to Carowinds is critical to our business. Unfortunately, the only thing that is predictable at this point is that there will be heavy traffic, congestion, and often significant delays on I-77, especially for those who are traveling south throughout Charlotte to get to our park. On March 31st, 1973, Carowinds officially opened to 6,000 guests amid great fanfare. The grand opening marked the culmination of years of formulation, planning, development by founder E. Pat Hall, a Charlotte businessman. 5 decades later, in 2023, Carowinds is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Since its opening, the park has grown in scale and popularity with 60 attractions in the world's tallest and fastest giga coaster. Just as Carowinds has continuously sought to maintain and enhance the park over the past 5 decades to meet our consumers' needs, so too should the roadway system be improved to adapt to the increased traffic. Interstates are the lifeblood of travel and tourism industry. Charlotte sits at the crossroads of 2 major interstates and is fortunate to also have an international hub airport that allows all of our guests and other tourists to easily access and traverse the region. We should be investing in the essential infrastructure to ensure that we are prepared for the continued growth of our economy. I learned recently that the section of I-77 you are considering was last expanded and improved in the 1990s, nearly 30 years ago. And studies to make additional improvements to the road go back nearly as far. That's far too long for such a vital infrastructure link. With more than 170,000 vehicles traveling on I-77 daily, it's no secret that traffic is getting worse and it's not going to fix itself. I urge you to vote to move forward with studying the corridor and funding options for much needed improvements to I-77. Please help Carowinds and other businesses that hire local employees, attract guests from near and far. We want them to tell their friends what a great region we have here around Charlotte, so that they will want to come back and continue to support our local economy. Again, thank you for your support.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up, we have Jan Martin. Welcome. You have 3 minutes again. Tell us who you are, and the mic is yours.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak on the importance of investing in our region's infrastructure. My name is Jan Martin. I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Communications for Domtar, headquartered in Fort Mill, South Carolina. We're the largest integrated manufacturer and marketer of uncoated free sheet paper in North America, and we're the largest one of the largest manufacturers of pulp in the world. I'm speaking here tonight because we have 3 facilities in the Charlotte region, including our U.S. corporate offices, all of which are along the I-77 corridor from Charlotte to Rock Hill. I wanted to bring a bit of a different perspective in our facilities that are located in both York County and in Mecklenburg County. With 11 packaging mills and 9 manufacturing and converting sites across North America, we can understand why both logistics and supply chain concerns remain high on our list of priorities. We closely monitor factors that contribute to the success and wellness of our business, and over 600 area employees, such as supply chain, reliability, predictable distribution of our products to clients, safety of our workforce, including their commutes, and accessibility to the Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Transportation infrastructure underpins all of these factors. Our ability to safely and efficiently move product and recruit top-tier talent is largely dependent on the ability to move in and around the Charlotte region, with I-77 being a vital corridor. To say that interstate is no longer keeping up with demand would be an understatement, and the statistics are hard to argue. You may know York County is the 4th fastest growing county in South Carolina, and Mecklenburg is in the top 10 of the fastest growing counties in the United States. The Charlotte region is expected to grow by 50% by 2050, going from 3 million to 4.5 million. The addition of 1.5 million residents is the equivalent of adding the Raleigh MSA to the region over the next 30 years. And the fastest growth is expected in York and Lancaster counties. They are forecast to at least double in size over the next 30 years. We can't wait for the improvements for I-77. We need to act as soon as possible. That growth is due to the effective business recruitment and expansion, good schools, and a nationally recognized quality of life, accomplishments that should be celebrated. That growth also means more cars on the road, cars filled with families, commuters, visitors, and other travelers who flow through the region's transportation system. At Domtar, we believe we are in the perfect region to meet our business and employees' needs that offers a high quality of life. We want to preserve that appeal, and we are grateful to this body for spending as much time as you have over the past year on I-77 South. I am encouraged, and I want to keep on encouraging you to keep this process moving forward. As a company dependent on transportation infrastructure, we understand the demands new construction and projected delivery dates have on state and regional budgets. With raw materials, employment shortages, and inflation having significant effects on the transportation industry, looking at all the possible delivery methods is the correct approach, and I commend you on these discussions. I-77 is too critical to the region's vitality to neglect. I would urge you to consider support of the local communities, families, employees, job creators, and economic engines of the region with your vote tonight. I offer my humble encouragement to please allow NCDOT to move forward with further study and analysis of this vital corridor. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. All right, so that ends the comments that we have for tonight. So I'm going to drop down to the ethics, awareness, and conflict of interest monitor. I'm going to pass over to Mr. Burke.
In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any of the matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved.
Okay, do we have anybody here? Might as well go to that now.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a conflict with item 12. My law firm actually has a conflict, so I'm going to recuse from that matter. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony, for that. Anybody else conflict? All right, very good. And as a reminder on that as well, get online. It's real easy to get your conflict of interest reminder filled out so that Neil won't have to chase you down. So please go ahead and get that. All right, on the consent agenda. So since we had no changes to that, I'm going to look for a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda as published. So I have a motion, please. So moved. Second. Who's the second?
Got a second.
James? All right, very good. Got that? All right, very good. All in favor? Opposed? Negative. Who would, right? All right, next up, Jennifer, you're up for the CRTPO discretionary funds project call, recommended projects. Welcome back. Get close to that again, as far as the microphone, so we can all hear you.
So thank you. I'm Jennifer Stafford with CRTPO staff, and I'm the staff lead for the project oversight committee and the discretionary funded program. Last month, Andrew Van Treska gave a information presentation to you all on the fall call summary, and I wanted to follow that up today. So today we are requesting action for you to approve discretionary funds for the projects recommended from the fall 2022 project call and amend the TIP to add the funding allocations to the new and existing projects. And part of that is to approve a resolution to endorse 4 CMAQ applications. That's 4 of the new projects in the amount of $9,616,300. So we received, this is just a summary of the applications we received, and Andrew presented this last time. We received 34 applications, totaling almost $80 million. We had about $59.1 million available. So we're short about 20 million. These are the recommended highway projects. So the projects go to the project oversight committee. They review the scores and then do the recommendation to the TCC. The TCC has recommended all of these projects. These are also all of the roadway projects that we had received. So it is recommended to fund all of these projects. And there's 9 here for $36 million. The first 2 are supplemental funds requested. The bridge project, the first one actually bid this summer. It was short, so that's a known amount. They will not come back for supplemental funds. The second one is a project that's been ongoing. There's some asbestos in the soil. It's taken a little bit more work to get the asbestos out. The other projects are all new. The non-highway projects, so in January, we had some comments, feedback from the TCC as well as the board. We returned to the Project Oversight Committee and had discussions about the recommended list. At that time, CATS had requested funding for 20 chargers. They have reduced their funding request for 15 chargers, which gave a surplus back to the pot, so to speak, for about $2 million. The Project Oversight Committee had recommended that the next project be funded is on the bike ped. Again, all of the projects for the roadways were already recommended. So we went back to the TCC. The TCC also recommended adding in that extra project, which is the Davidson project for shared use path. Also, what that did when CATS reduced their request is Pineville Matthews Road for the shared use path. They were short. We ran out of funding and there was short about 160,000. So that made that request whole. They requested 2 million. When we came to you in January, we were able to fund about 1.8, but now we're able to fund the whole amount. So again, these projects have all been recommended by the TCC. We had 5 planning requests. The TCC, the Project Oversight Committee, recommended funding all 5 of those projects. You will see these projects are handled a little bit differently. You'll see them in Bob Cook's presentation on the UPWP. So when we amend the tip to bring the capital projects in, the planning projects get amended into the UPWP. So this is just a high view summary. Again, the highway projects, there was 9 with 2 requests for supplemental funding. It's recommended to fund all of those, which is about 62% of the total funding available. The non-highway bike and ped, there were 14 applications. One small one for, it was about 300,000 on an existing greenway project. They put it out to bid, and so that's a pretty safe number of what's needed to finish that project as well. That funding is about 25%. And then the new funds that we had for carbon reduction, we received 3 applications recommending funding all 3 of those, as well as the planning projects. So again, we're here to for this action to be requested to fund these projects, amend the tip, and to endorse the application for CMAQ projects. With that, are there any questions?
Okay, any questions for our presenter? Across the board. Do we need 2 motions on this separate one, or we can do it all in one?
Here, Ron.
No? Oh, I'm sorry. You're over there.
Yeah, thank you. The last meeting, it was implied that even though it went back to TCC and the committee, that the final approval of funds came down to this board and we could move funds wherever the entire board seemed necessary, or deemed necessary. I'd like to challenge that tonight. And I'll put in a motion if I have to, but I'll wait for further discussion. But you know, we're still putting $6.5 million over in CATS for battery chargers for potential EV vehicles, buses, correct?
It's electric chargers that charge electric buses.
Right.
Yeah,
How
so it's
many
not-
electric buses do we have?
I'm speaking for CATS, unless there's somebody here from CATS. I believe they're programmed to purchase 63, and they're ahead of schedule. They do, again, I don't totally feel comfortable. I might need to
And that's
return.
okay.
They will come back to request those 5 that they pulled off at some point. So you'll have another opportunity.
Well, I'd like to reduce their ask to about $782,000. And fund at least, I think, we got circled here, 3 other projects. Yeah, and they definitely are carbon reduction because it's all about side paths and greenways. And that is what we build these greenways for, to get people off the roads, have them on their bicycles to get back and forth to work or grocery stores and such. Yeah, and so, I mean, I'll make a motion, but I'm curious, is anybody else in favor or looking at that? And really testing the waters here if we do have that power to adjust and move money around.
Okay. Renee, go ahead.
I'm curious about what projects are you looking at? And then as a side part of that, I remember, I don't remember specifically, but was it Mayor Knox who last month had a sidewalk project that was, it is funded now?
Yep, that is fun. So I'll just, I have to use, I printed this out and obviously I didn't enlarge it. So I have to use my phone here, but
So this request is for, obviously, it's going to take some time to put all this in place, and they have 63. You think that is the request?
So what they'll do is they'll replace those, some diesel buses with electric. So if you look at the carbon reduction, it's probably quite a bit. One of the things that the project oversight committee will be doing this upcoming year is to develop criteria on scoring these air quality type projects, and we will come back to you on that method. This past year, we were notified of the carbon reduction funds program in July. Our fall call opened in August, so we didn't have time to develop a scoring system and come back to all of you to get that approved before we open the call. So we tried to, or the project oversight committee tried to use the carbon reduction funds in the spirit of the program.
James,
Do you have access to?
the microphone, please.
Do you have access to any data on the ridership numbers, be it diesel or electric? How full these buses are regardless of what's powering them?
I do not, but I'm happy to get that information if I can. I will ask Katz and get back to you.
I will. Lee?
I'm not sure if there's a motion on the table. If there is, I would, in the interest of time, move to defer this to our next meeting and ask that someone from CATS come back so we can have a proper briefing and really understand whether or not this ask is too large or not. I don't feel that I have enough information tonight, and I don't know that we would be productive if we continue without that.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah, Joe Polino from Village of Marvin. Quick question, if we were to entertain that, would we have to stay within the same category? Like it's just a question for, I guess, CRTPO. If we're going to take funds away, does it have to stay in the same category as carbon reduction, or can it be moved into bicycle and pedestrian or whatever? I don't know the answer to that.
I believe the last meeting, and I'll let staff speak on this. Sorry to interrupt. But we moved from the CATS money for a sidewalk project. So I would say we've set the precedent that we can move to any project here. And that additional 5 million, and we can definitely, there is not a motion on the table, Commissioner Altman, but I would say definitely look at all these other projects. I mean, there's projects down at Mint Hill. There's still another project in Davidson that we could focus on, and it delivers, a lot more projects done. CATS has a pretty large operating budget. They can scale as they need to, as far as charging stations and or buses.
John?
Yes, as the MTC rep at our last meeting, first, I do agree with Commissioner Altman that we should have, more formal briefing from someone from CATS. But we voted to endorse the underground bus station. And a concern that was brought up from many, including myself, was reducing diesel fumes in an underground garage area. And so electric buses are going to be very important, and they're going to need to be charged. And I know CATS wants to convert to those as quickly as possible because they don't want to be driving a lot of diesel underground, when that's built. So just want to bring that forward. But I do agree with Commissioner Altman. We should have someone from CATS come formally tell us what their needs are.
Any other comments around Rusty?
Yeah, and I would add, as a member of MTC, we collectively voted to move towards an electric platform instead of CNG, to move towards the zero carbon footprint in the future. And that's why we've ordered these buses. And that was preemptively what this was all about. These chargers were going to support the bus fleet that is coming to us now. So that was, part of that is going to be the infrastructure to support it. So that's where this ask actually came from.
Go ahead, Ed.
I was not briefed by staff about this. I'd like to offer more information on behalf of Charlotte. So I think I'm in favor also of a deferral so that we can get to Mr. Cagle in. We've had a couple of briefings on council about the fact that the buses are aging out. There's an urgent need to replace them. And the city council is very committed to these electric buses. But I do understand for the purposes of this group that that vote should be supported by a better briefing. Not that yours was bad, but I mean, from CATS. So I'm prepared to support the motion to defer.
All right, any other comments around the horn? I think we've, James.
Is it possible to pull this one item, vote on the others, and then redistribute the money if it's the wish of the board? So that we aren't holding up.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Neil.
from what I'm hearing, this potentially affects the whole package of funding that we've brought forward to you all. And we use a quantitative and qualitative process to rank these projects. The only difference, as Jennifer mentioned, is we're in the process of developing a carbon reduction program criteria that would be able to measure the emissions benefits of, say, a bus charger against a bike ped project. We found out about this funding in the summer of last year and didn't have enough time to really put a criteria into our policy. So if staff had more time, we'd be able to coordinate with CATS and just bring the entire package back with some additional information to CATS. But that's really up to the purview of the board tonight.
If it's possible, could that information include ridership? We had a request last night for a substantial funding request for the CATS service in Union County. And it looked like the average number of riders coming from far away as Wingate to Monroe to Indian Trail to Stallings into town was an average of 10 people were using the service. So with that number being so low, I was curious citywide, how many people are actually using a bus regardless of what powers the bus?
Okay, Ed.
That's a fair comment. There have been media reports about low ridership. We are in the process of kind of re-engineering how the buses operate with this Envision My Ride program. Again, something on which we could receive a more complete report. I just have a concern trying to break this up, that unless we know what the result is of the conversation about the buses, we won't know what we're allocating to the other projects, and probably should do that all at once, in my view.
Any other comments? Looks like it's heading down a certain direction, but if any other comments, my comment on is we obviously should all have this information at our fingertips much earlier if there are these kinds of questions. We had this discussion, we had presentation last month, I guess it was, from Jennifer, maybe the month before, to know this is coming. So it'd be great if it wasn't this late in it, but I think that if somebody would like to make a motion on what we do next, we'll entertain that.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we had a motion.
I'm not sure if there was actually an original motion put on the table. Are you did you not actually put it on the
There
table?
wasn't a motion. It was just a discussion
Right.
Okay.
to see if this board was interested. I don't know if this board is interested in doing that.
Sounds like
Yeah,
they are.
so that's, I just threw it out there as a talking point.
Sounds like they are. So make the motion, please.
Well, I don't need to defer this if the body is ready to vote, but if if there's a lingering concern about the appropriateness of this charge, then yes, I will move to defer this to our next meeting.
All right, second,
Second.
And I believe it's a matter of good process that we should get the briefing we talked about. So I'm seconding, I'm on
I think
board
we
with
caught
that.
it over there. James had seconded. All right,
Yeah.
that motion is up. Any further discussion on it around the horn here? Look around my corners here. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, looks like you got it all there, Neil. All right, good discussion around that. Again, more prepared information. Jennifer, thank you very much for that, and we'll look forward to our staff coordinating that next effort with information from CATS as well. Next up, Travis, you're up. This is the 24 to 33 Transportation Improvement Program update.
Yep. Hey, everyone, I'm Travis Johnson with the CRTPO. I'm just here to give a brief update on the 2024-2033 TIP. It's something in the process we are currently engaged in. So I want to go over just a brief update, talk about the next steps, and then just talk about a brief schedule for prioritization 7.0, which will be the next TIP. So again, the STIP must be adopted every 4 years, and in North Carolina, typically a STIP is adopted every 2 year it's typically a 2-year development cycle. MPOs and TIPs incorporated directly without change into North Carolina's STIP. What's important about this list is it's fiscally constrained. A lot of our lists sometimes don't have that requirement. This must conform with state implementation plan for air quality, because the CRTPO is in a maintenance status for ozone. For the CRTPO requirements, we must ensure the TIP is consistent with NCDOT's TIP. All of the projects that go into the TIP, we must amend the current NTP to meet the requirements. And then we also must conform with the air quality conformity determination. So again, the 2024-2033 STIP was started based upon existing projects in the 2020-2029 STIP. We did not add new projects as part of the P6 process. We developed a list of delivery projects that were sent out, and then additional projects were added in based upon a seniority approach. NCDOT released the first draft STIP in August 4th of 2022. At that time, we had the opportunity to utilize a project exchange to which projects of somewhat equal value were allowed to be exchanged. We took advantage of this process twice, once on September 21st and again on October 19th. NCDOT then released a draft of the 2023-2024 STIP. I'm sorry, it's 2024-2033 in December of 2022. Coming up next, we'll be coming back in March to make a request to open a public comment period on the conformity determination in 2050 MTP amendments and a draft of the 2024-2033 TIP. That comment period will be for 30 days, so it'll run from March until April. At that time, we'll come back after that process, we'll come back as an information item to the board in May, and then we'll come back for adoption in June. Along with this process, we're gearing up for prioritization 7.0. The work group is expected to, or the Board of Transportation is expected to approve the P7 work group recommendations in spring of 2023. Our submittal window will open around July, September of 2023, and then scoring will begin in the fall. It is NCDOT and spot offices develops the priority 7 quantitative project scores is expected in October to March of 2023 into 2024. So with that, any questions? Again, this is just a reminder that we're still in the existing TIP. We're working through the process. We'll be coming back with drafts that will go for a public comment period, which will be coming back to you for adoption. And then we're gearing up for doing this all over again for prioritization 7.0. Any questions?
Any questions around the horn? Again, we want to be prepared. Rob, you're over here.
Me
Thank you.
again.
Me again.
How are we advertising the public comment period so we can engage more of the public?
So we'll be utilizing the website again to promote this. We're going to be posting for 2 weeks in the Mecklenburg Times. And we'll pushing it through social media, and we'll work with, communities to utilize your social media and websites as well, just to get the information out there as much as possible.
All right, any other questions for our presenter out there? Again, we want to be as prepared as we can when it does come to us next time to make sure that we get all the questions asked and answered early. And so if that's it, this was certainly informational. Thank you, Travis.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
I look forward to speaking with you to open the public engagement period.
All right. All right, next up, CRTPO 2024 Unified Work Plan. That's good. Mr. Cook, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Wanted to update everyone on the status of the FY 2024 UPWP, our budget for the year. We'll talk a little bit about funding, of course, and provide you with an overview, and then talk about draft allocations, building upon what we presented to you last month, and then talk about next steps. So if you've seen this before, this is our available funding for the next fiscal year through the three primary sources: Section 104F PL funds or planning funds, surface transportation block grant direct attributable funds, and then lastly, Section 5303 funds provided to CRTPO by the Federal Transit Administration for transit planning. Just to give you an update on a few issues. This was just discussed by Jennifer during her presentation. There were 5 planning projects endorsed by the Project Oversight Committee. Hopefully, they will be approved maybe at the next month's meeting for inclusion in the next year's work program. 5 projects, one supported by the Central Line Regional Council, then Indian Trail, Matthews, Morrisville, and Stallings. Throughout this process, we'll continue to assume that these projects will be fully funded when the board acts on that project list. Another issue that we had talked about at last month's meeting, but did not have complete information, involves carryover projects. And these are planning projects that use prior year's funds, but that need to be carried over into future fiscal years, FY 24 in this case, because the work on those projects is not done. And so we've been able to work with the jurisdictions involved with these projects to come up with these final amounts to be carried over into the next fiscal year. So they range from relatively small amounts, $5,000 for the projects in Statesville and Mooresville, to larger amounts for the SEAM project running from Charlotte up to Statesville. In terms of the overall allocations, we're at a second draft stage at this point. We've received more information since we talked with you last at the January meeting. Most important probably is the analysis of the trends for the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 25, the current fiscal year. There still may be some minor allocations, adjustments to the allocations between now and March. But I think generally speaking, what you'll see will remain fairly steady. And then we will conduct one final staff level review at the February 22nd transportation staff meeting. And this will be an opportunity for us to engage with your TCC members before they act on a recommendation to adopt the UPWP at their March meeting. So getting into the allocations themselves, what you have here is a list of the task codes that make up the Unified Planning Work Program there on the left. And then the first draft and then activities, of course, that are funded through those task codes. And then the first draft allocation column is what we presented to you last month. And then the second draft allocation is how we've refined them since that meeting. So they've remained fairly steady for the most part. The first draft allocations were guesstimates based upon what we had funded last year and historically funded in those categories, but without the knowledge of how funding trends had played out for the first 2 quarters of the current fiscal year. So in that first category, data and planning support, first draft allocation was $700,000, and you see that that has not changed terribly much since last month's meeting. Planning process, a bit more funded in that category, primarily because we do anticipate that we'll be able to get underway with the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and spend a fair amount of time on that initiative during the fiscal year. UPWP remains fairly pretty much the same, a slight decrease. The tip category, we did put more money into that, a substantial amount into this category for the upcoming fiscal year because of a lot of the activities that Travis just described to you. And then for special studies, these are those local planning projects that have been mentioned, and that total is $951,000. Those dollars are not subject to the local match requirements that is distributed throughout all the member jurisdictions. The agency that is responsible for that jurisdiction, for that project, pays that local match. So these are kind of in addition to the overall work program for the year. Getting into Title VI requirements and environmental justice requirements, We're looking at $20,000 in both categories for next fiscal year. That matches pretty much with what we estimated when we met with you last. And this is an increase over last year by about $5,000. Public participation, we thought we would program a little bit more money than we had in the past. We want to make sure we have adequate resources to get the word out about our organization to the greatest extent possible. Also, because with the development of the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we as staff will probably take on more responsibilities for public involvement associated with that, as opposed to the consultant assistance we've traditionally used. And then lastly, with management and operations, there's a sizable amount in there, a bit less than the current fiscal year. But these are the dollars that really fund the really basics of what we do as an organization. And next year, one of the most substantial things is probably going to be the reassessment of the memorandum of understanding. So the numbers have remained fairly stable from last month when we presented some preliminary numbers to you. And I'm hopeful that most of these will stay pretty steady between now and when we come back to you in March for adoption. So in terms of some of those remaining issues, when we last came to you in January, we still needed to assess those Q1 and Q2 expenditures. We've done that. We finalized the Section 5303 allocations. We had to make a couple of minor adjustments there, but that was just to the tune of about $600. The TOD grant, the Transit Oriented Development Grant that CATS was awarded by the Federal Transit Administration, we have gotten the final number for that, and we will program $500,000 for that. We will not touch that money as an organization, but because it is a planning project, a transportation planning project in our region, it does have to be reflected in our work program. We've completed work on how we are going to allocate dollars for the Complete Streets 2.5% funding obligation. Our focus will be the same during the next fiscal year in terms of examining corridors against NCDOT's active transportation corridors against NCDOT's Complete Streets methodology. And then lastly, we still had an outstanding issue with the carryovers, which we have finalized. So in terms of next steps, we have completed the second draft presentations to both the TCC and the board with tonight's meeting. Again, we'll go to the transportation staff meeting on February 22nd, and we will come back to you first to the TCC in early March for a recommendation, and then to you for adoption. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Bob. On that, any questions for Mr. Cook? On the corner. Look to my corner over here, Rob, so I just want to make sure I don't miss you. So, all right. I think you're up again. If there's no questions, we'll move on to the next one. This is item number 9. You can tell us all about the self-certification.
Yes. Wanted to talk a little bit about the process tonight. The memo that was included in your agenda packet, and then talk about next steps for this initiative as well. So federal regulations and NCDOT policy do require that MPOs annually certify that their planning processes are addressing the major planning issues that affect the region, and that we are conducting what we do in accordance with all laws and regulations that affect the metropolitan planning process. A board approval is required for this. And in North Carolina, what we do is we link this to the adoption of the Unified Planning Work Program. So we have to do it, and we think it's in consultation with NCDOT, think it's best to link it to the work program, because as an organization, we're evaluating what we do and how we do it for the next fiscal year. So it's a good time to look back at the current fiscal year, and determine whether or not we're meeting all our requirements. So what we do is there is a checklist that's provided by the Federal Highway Administration, which we review and provide responses to. This was discussed actually at a transportation staff meeting at the beginning of February. There were no concerns raised at that time by TCC members from throughout the planning area. And I did want to note that We do have to do this on an annual basis, but every 4 years, FHWA and FTA conduct a more in-depth certification review. And we're up for that process later on this year in June, as a matter of fact. The date hasn't been determined yet, but we are looking at a June date for that to take place. And this is just a much more in-depth analysis of the MPO's practices and policies. So you had, again, in your agenda packet, a memo that included that checklist with 11 questions, and then also had staff responses in there. I won't go through every item in that memo, but there was also, I did want to note at the end, there were many citations in that memo and checklist. And so we did include a table at the bottom which identified those citations. In the first 6 items in that memo, at least in my opinion, are probably the most significant because they're the foundational elements of really any metropolitan planning organization. They talk about the memorandum of understanding, how board representation, whether or not you have elected officials and representatives of transit on your board, talks about the planning area boundary, and then it also gets into those essential documents, the Unified Planning Work Program, the TIP, as well as the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So that's probably the most significant part of this self-certification analysis. Not to say the other items aren't important. They address key processes associated with a metropolitan planning organization, including the congestion management process, environmental mitigation. There's also one item on there that discusses a whole host of federal regulations like the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Civil Rights Act. Also discusses public involvement, vital to any metropolitan planning organization. And then it also talks how we engage with agencies that have an impact on transportation planning. So historic districts, for example, are covered under that category. So March action, in terms of the next step, we will be seeking a March action following the adoption of the UPWP. At that time, you'll be asked to adopt a resolution that certifies our transportation planning process for fiscal year 2023. And one question we did have for the board tonight, I believe we did this last year. We did place this on the consent agenda because we didn't really have any significant feedback coming from the board itself or from your TCC members. And I believe we did put it on the consent agenda and wanted to see if the board was open to doing that next month to save some time on the agenda.
All right. So any questions along this way? And again, I'm going to really encourage all of us to ask the questions early in the process. With staff is always available to us to help us along and have basically all the questions answered before we go forward. So please reach out if you have any questions to staff, either Bob or Neil or anybody else on the staff. Let Bob coordinate and direct that, and we can then we can decide if we're going to put it on the consent agenda. Or are you asking us to do that tonight?
And it would be good to get that indication tonight, but it's not critical. We can work with you, Mr. Chairman, and determine whether or not that's appropriate. I'd encourage everyone who looks at that to contact me with any questions you might have if anything's confusing. But I don't think it's critical that we make that call tonight.
Okay. And again, if there's any comments around the horn here that we should address with it, please address them early. And even if we did put it on the consent agenda, if next time if there was a question, we can pull it down and talk about it. So I think that's probably the approach that we're going to take. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, you get to leave for a minute. All right, Jarrell, where are you? You're over there. Great. Welcome. The Transit Work Group, informational on it. Floor is yours.
All right. Good evening. I'm Jarrell Leonard with CRTPO, Transit Planner. So in 2019, there was a staffing and resources study that called for the creation of a transit planner position, and the needs for that came about because CRTPO, along with CDOT and CATS and other transit entities, needed further coordination, tracking formulas, as well as federal and state federal grant funds amongst the operators in the planning area. In summer 2021, CRTPO staff had conducted interviews with the county-based public transportation operators, and it was to basically seek feedback on understanding the needs of more frequent coordination amongst them And also just to know whether or not how that would occur. And one of the main recommendations was the forming of a transit providers work group, and also the recommendation of the work group to meet quarterly. In summer 2022, CRTPO followed up on those recommendations made prior with the Transit Education Initiative TEI leadership about the possibility of converting that task force into a possible transit providers work group. And the TEI leadership called for simply that we take that, CRTPO staff takes that to the board chair as well as vice chair about possibly creating a work group, and also drafting a survey amongst the transit operators to see how the interest would be there, just to affirm what was specified in the summer of 2021. In fall 2022, a survey was conducted and it was sent to all of the CRTPO planning area public transportation agencies to gauge the interest on the transit, a possible transit work group, and the results showed that it was overall desirable. As you may see on this slide, you will see that the majority of respondents said they would support a work group amongst the public transportation operators. The majority of the response showed that it would be called for the frequency would be quarterly. The second and tied was also monthly and bi-monthly, and the sequential was every other month, and just depends on the scope of work required for the work group. One of the main responses is that Connect Beyond, which was adopted in January of 2022, should be incorporated into the vision of this transit providers work group. And most respondents agreed. So listed in ranking order shows the topics with the highest recommendation for response from the operators: resource sharing, section 5303 and 5307 funding program assistance, transit performance-based planning, the section 5307 memorandum of understanding, and also compliance with federal and state transit programs. So the purpose of the work group would be basically to create a means to facilitate and also do better collaboration and coordination for CRTPO planning area public transportation operators. And as you can see, the primary task is 5303, the 5307 memorandum of understanding, which was adopted in the summer of 2021. Performance-based planning, which is tied around public transportation asset management, and also safety targets, and also doing the federally mandated and state mandated items that CRTPO must do, including the UPWP, the TIP, the MTP, as well as the CTP. Work group membership would be relevant staffers from CATS, Union County Transportation, Mecklenburg County Transportation, Iredell County Transportation, also known as ICATS, Central Carolina Regional Council, NCDOT Integrated Mobility Division, and also ex officio membership from relevant planning partners such as CDOT. So we took these results of the survey to CRTPO board leadership, i.e. the chair and vice chair, and the recommendation was to come before the board as well as TCC this month, the month of February 2023. Next the follow-up steps is we will bring this to action to not only TCC, but also you all at the board for recommending the approval of a transit providers work group. Any questions?
Question, there you go, Lee.
Yes, sir. Can you go back to the pie graph? It was like your third to last slide. Thank you. I want to understand how what is being proposed in this action item or this item on our agenda, how is it similar or different than Central Carolina's advancing the plan committee, which has just been formed to discuss a regional transit authority? Can anyone help me with that?
So the difference between this and what Central Carolina is doing with Connect Beyond, there are mandated programs that MPO has to do, such as 5303, which is incorporated in the UPWP. Also in the summer of 2021, there was the CRTPO board adopted a memorandum of understanding for the section 5307 program, which requires them to do an annual report, meaning the public transportation operators within our planning area. And one of the main things that this work group would do would be focusing on those actions, because they have been called upon for them to do within the CRTPO planning area.
Well, I must say I didn't totally track with everything you just said. I guess I'm struggling because I've been asked to sit on that committee and I've said yes, because it's incredibly important that we work with our regional partners to develop some sort of regional transit authority so we can pool our resources and deliver a product that all of our communities can use. And it's a heavy lift. It's another big committee. It's very important work. And this just seems so similar. And all of us serve in multiple capacities. And I'm still not clear functionally if there's a good reason that I mean, are there very different geographic footprints perhaps?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. So it's for the CRTPO planning area, which is CATS, ICATS, Union County, and Mecklenburg County Transportation for the 3 counties that we serve here in the MPO itself. Whereas the Connect Beyond is a 12-county area in both states. So it's a much smaller
Gotcha.
footprint.
That's what I needed. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Questions for our presenter? All right, we'll move on. Dr. Earl, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Mr. Cook, you're back up. Charlotte urban area boundary.
Yes, we had a discussion about this at last month's meeting. We had a bit of a snafu with the presentation, and it was not the correct presentation that we had intended to give you. So we wanted to quickly run through that presentation that was also sent out to you later on. So in terms of what we want to talk about is, first of all, the good news associated with this, give you a few definitions, which I do think we may have covered a little bit at last month's meeting, but the difference between an urban area and an urban area boundary and a planning area and a planning area boundary. And then there were kind of 3, as we call them, 3 W's about what happened, why it happened, and where it happened. And then there was the issue of Statesville and Marshville that we'll get into, and then some next steps going forward. So in terms of that good news is that based upon how the Census Bureau defined the Charlotte urban area, or redefined it, one might say, is that we are not required to change our planning area boundary. We could if we wanted to, perhaps, but we are not required to do so. And I don't think anyone from staff would necessarily recommend that we do. So good news is that we are not required to change the planning area boundary. And that is because the urban area, as designated by the Census Bureau, did not change in any way that would require the addition of new municipalities or counties. And for the past several censuses, that was the case, where new territory was brought in, new jurisdictions were brought in, but that was not the case this time. And then one other thing I think it's important to note is that those municipalities that are no longer in the Charlotte urban area can remain active CRTPO members. They do not have to be excluded from the organization because of the change to the urban area boundary. And so I wanted to get into the urban area boundary with a little bit more detail. And what you're seeing here in purple on the right-hand side on the map is the 2010 urban area as defined by the Census Bureau. And other federal and the Census Bureau defines urban areas for their own statistical purposes. They don't do it for another agency, whether it be state, federal, or local. But other agencies use this information for certain purposes. And one of the main ones, at least the one that affects us the most, is how the FHWA uses this information. And they take urban areas and they say any that are 50,000 or more in population are required to establish metropolitan planning organizations. And the census designated urban area is the minimum planning area for an MPO. So if we were brand new to this game, as a result of the 2010 to 2020 census, that area in purple would have to be within the metropolitan planning area service or planning area boundary. So, but this compares and contrasts the 2010 urban area that you just saw in purple with the 2020 urban area in green. So it's very clear, I think, on the slide, on the image on the right-hand side of the slide. And you can see how we as a region saw a contraction of the Charlotte urban area from 2010. And I'll get into the details in a moment, but most notably to the north is Statesville. that is no longer considered to be in the Charlotte urban area. And then to the east in Union County, Marshville is no longer in the Charlotte urban area. But again, to emphasize, that does not mean they have to come out of the CRTPO's planning area. And then you can see other areas where territory was lost in South Carolina. They were not a part of our planning area. Also in Lincoln County, also not a part of our planning area. And then along the Cabarrus-Mecklenburg County line, and a very small area, which you can barely see on this slide, because it was, I think, maybe 0.6 of a square mile in Catawba County, where 150 crosses from Iredell County into Catawba County. So that was about an urban area. Now, this is about a planning area boundary. And planning area boundary is an MPO's area of jurisdiction, and that is developed in coordination with the state DOT, Federal Highway Administration, and of course, local governments. And that planning area is established by looking at the urban area as the minimum planning area, as I mentioned before. So that's the bare minimum that you have to include within your planning area boundary. And then you kind of smooth that boundary to really create a more logical planning area, because you can see it's kind of jagged, if you will, that urban area that is established as it's established by the Census Bureau. And so it's not a very logical area to plan for. You want to kind of smooth that out to come up with a more reasonable planning area. And then on top of that, FHWA guidance states that MPOs should include within their planning areas any area expected to be urban within 20 years. So those are really kind of the basics of how a planning area boundary is established and what a planning area boundary is for an MPO. So in terms of what happened, our urban area population increased by 130,431 people. But the urban area itself, the land area, decreased by 109 square miles. So fairly substantial contraction. And you can see in the box below the differences in population between and land area between the 2010 and the 2020 urban areas. Again, the population increase, but then also the contraction of the planning area by just shy of 109 square miles. So why it happened? Well, the Census Bureau changed its criteria for establishing urban areas from the 2010 census to the 2020 census. And these standards had been in place for a number of iterations of the census. So it's not like they change every 10 years, but they did make some changes that affected the how urban areas are designated, not just the Charlotte urban area. Many urban areas contracted in size throughout the country. But there were two changes that likely affected the Charlotte urban area. That one involves the inclusion of non-contiguous territory. There's a requirement, or there was a standard, I should say, about referred to as hops and jumps. That allowed for the inclusion of a qualifying area, even if it was not immediately adjacent to that urban area. And that maximum jump distance was lowered from 2.5 miles to 1.5 miles. And we believe that that's what likely affected Statesville and Marshville. If we go back to the planning area boundary, and you can see the purple representing the 2010 urban area and the green representing the 2020, you can see that rather tenuous link where the green ends and the purple begins. So since that was reduced, that's why Statesville came out, and you can see the same at the bottom right, where Marshville came out of the planning area. Came out of the urban area. I apologize for getting the two confused there. And then also a change to what is considered a qualifying urban area. There was a shift in by establishing density from going from housing units versus population. So it changed from 2,500 person minimum threshold to 2,000 housing units or 5,000 persons. So rather substantial changes, which affected what the urban area looks like and likely resulted in that contraction. So where it happened in a little bit more detail, in South Carolina, the Charlotte urban area had extended into South Carolina, specifically York and Lancaster counties. 35.7 square miles are now assigned to the Rock Hill urban area. There is still a small portion of the Charlotte urban area in York County, but I think it's to the tune of maybe 10 square miles. It's a relatively small amount. Then in northern Iredell County, as we've discussed, the area around Statesville, that's 32.8 square miles. Statesville is now classified as an urban area, but is below that 50,000 MPO threshold. In Lincoln County, the Charlotte urban area was 17.6 square miles. That is now classified as rural. Again, that was not in our planning area. In Eastern Union County, the reduction was rather small because it was that jump category that brought in Marshville. So the area contracted by 5.4 miles. In Western Mecklenburg County, this is one of the odder things. A portion of Mecklenburg County near the Whitewater Center is now assigned to the Gastonia urban area. And then in Eastern Mecklenburg County, along the line, the boundary between Mecklenburg and Cabarrus County, 7.5 miles are now assigned to the Concord urban area, despite that area being within Mecklenburg County. And then last but not least was that Catawba County portion that I mentioned earlier, 0.6 square miles, now classified as rural. So those are where it all happened, the 109 square miles. Getting into the Statesville Marshville issues again, to repeat, both are no longer in the urban area, but they can remain active participating members of the CRTPO. In Marshville's case, I referred to the FHWA guidance I mentioned earlier that encourages MPOs to establish planning area boundaries that include areas expected to be urban within the next 20 years. And in staff's opinion, the region's growth is such that, and the effect of the Marshville Expressway likely means that Charlotte or Marshville will become part of the Charlotte urban area after the 2030 census. And similar situation for Statesville. It is again classified as an urban area, but below the MPO threshold. It was probably eliminated from the urban area due to the criteria change that affect Marshville. And again, with the region's growth being what it is, it's likely that that link that was severed with the 2020 urban area will be reestablished after the 2030 census. So there is again no need for either community to exit the CRTPO. And one thing to note is remaining as active members keeps both communities eligible for our discretionary program funds. So in terms of next steps, we are still looking for a little bit more guidance from the Federal Highway Administration. There's some additional information coming from NCDOT. We are working with both Marshville and Statesville for confirmations about what they wish to do. We do need to reaffirm the planning area boundary. And then last but not least, we have to update our metropolitan planning agreements with the neighboring MPOs where some of our planning area, or rather some of the Charlotte urban area extends into their planning areas and vice versa. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you have some additional information you want to discuss about the MOU subcommittee.
I do a little bit, and thank you, Bob. And as a result of all this and the requirement from the feds, we have formed a MOU steering committee to go forward to help us reconstruct that agreement. It's a 10-year mandate. We're at that point right now. And so we did solicit had some recommendations from staff as well. People have volunteered to serve on that. So we've got it down to a short list. In fact, this is going to be the list. We have one more seat to fill on that, but we have Rob Kidwell from Huntersville, Ed Driggs from Charlotte. We have Renee Garner from Matthews, David Jones from Statesville, Brad Richardson from Stallings, and Ernestine Staton for Marshville. And we do understand some of the constraints that you may or may not have on the time, but we'd like to work around that with you because we're now starting to get a feel on what kind of time that this will be that you'll have to commit to. So, but we'll look for one more. I've had conversations with Craig Horn on this morning. So We'll see if Craig can get indoctrinated to understand a little bit about what it's going to be required. We're using a consultant to help us through this. And I think what we'll be looking for is, I've looked through the agreement. For one, there is a lot of boilerplate, a lot of things that we probably won't change. There probably are a few key points in there that we will want to talk on this committee and address. So we are going to have to move forward by requirement on that. And so I think this board gives this committee gives a good representation of the cross section of our region. So I appreciate all of you being willing to step up and help us out. So any other questions for Mr. Cook? All right, we'll let you off the hook.
Thank you.
And put me on it. How's that? All right, we'll drop down to one of our favorite topics during the last year or so, but we've had a lot of information that's been presented to us on this I-77 South unsolicited proposal. And as I've had to try to find out almost by fire hose, baptism by fire on this, I've spent hundreds of hours trying to understand this over the last year. And I've been privileged to be able to talk to everybody at the local level and some of the people who were involved in this before, both in the creation of what was a document, just to understand a little bit more. And then one of the things that really kind of stood out is we certainly have some sensitivity that's been talked around this room more than once in the last year. There's certainly some sensitivity to what may or may not have happened during the last effort on this on the north. And I want to certainly be sensitive to that as well, which has got me kind of diving into the policy, because I hear things about what did or what did not happen. And so I went to the policy and I want to review that. It's in your packet for tonight in a small print here. I'm going to put my glasses on to help do this, but there is a complete policy that DOT has, again, in your packet. This is North Carolina Department of Transportation, public-private partnerships, policies and procedures. And that was adopted. The copy that I have here is January 9th of 2014. One of the things that was interesting, again, to learn, even hearing comments around from some of the press, some of the questions that I get asked about it, is there is a process, review of unsolicited proposals. This is page 11 of that document, talks about a process for accepting and vetting unsolicited proposals will generally take two steps. Number one, meeting with the DOT to informally discuss an idea for this type of proposal. Two is submittal of a conceptual unsolicited proposal and then the department screening thereof. As Brett Knipe had shared with us earlier before we came to know this a little bit better last February, the unsolicited proposals by their policy will be kept confidential to the extent that it is allowable in accordance with North Carolina general statutes until such time as the unsolicited proposal is either accepted or rejected or another change. One of the highlights on this is the informal discussion with the departments that prior to submitting conceptual unsolicited proposal, individuals or firms may request a meeting with the oversight committee through the department's P3 coordinator to determine if a given concept is of merit and relevant to the department goals. Well, I think that we've now again learned through several presentations that we've had from both the DOT and our own staff that this is already on the STIP, and it is on the STIP as a managed lane project. Now, the original delivery dates before it was known that DOT had some significant funding challenges. The first section of it was to be delivered in 2045. The next section was to be delivered in 2050. Now, I'm going to look around this room a little bit and kind of guess the ages of some of us around here. That's a long time out still. And that's before the real recognition of DOT's issues. And so we want to, again, make aware of that project then could have the potential of moving forward a period of time after that. It could be 2060, could be 2070. Again, that's an unknown that we have to look at. But the conceptual unsolicited proposals, so each person that submits that at any point in time has to, at a minimum, address certain issues to be able to even be considered. One is the economic viability of the project, including the market outlook for private finance for the project. And the other part is the requirements and expectations of the department, the project delivery constraints, the risk to schedule, finance, and other elements, environmental impacts, including the NEPA, SEPA considerations, mitigation, permitting, and any other related issues, or any information deemed appropriate by the department based on the preliminary conversations and previous submissions. The initial screening on this will be broad and comprised of a preliminary review for legal allowances or restrictions, as well as technical, environmental, engineering, and financial considerations. And I find that interesting, again, just trying to make sure that I have enough information for those who ask me of it and have an understanding of it. But there is a policy certainly on the procurement and implementation of unsolicited proposals, and that's on page 12 of that. And it says, if so directed by the Secretary of Transportation or other necessary approvals, one of them is actually being this MPO, they could be sought by that department. Unsolicited proposals will be publicly and competitively procured in accordance with this policy. By virtue of providing an unsolicited proposal, the proposer who did all this 6 or 7 item document work before that I just mentioned, the proposer will be included on what they call the shortlisted proposals. And what I have learned that to come to mean is that since they did all the work, their work product is what's going to be the start of what DOT could consider. So I think it would be highly inappropriate, in my opinion, that if somebody did all the work and gave us the information, we took their information and says, thank you very much, and walk away from it. So I think it'd be inappropriate to consider that. But the proposer maintains that its team, to the extent originally proposed, unless exceptions to the original team have been approved by the department, or the proposer is pre-qualified by the department to perform the work. So basically what that's saying is we want to know that if this proposal has a team and it does move forward, that at some point in time, if that team changes, then certainly the department would want to be aware of it. I hear a lot of things about the old proposal, not only in that, but how it was done. And I think that from my standpoint, and I want to hear from around the board, that what I'm hearing that happened maybe 10 years ago or so, certainly the lessons that brought forward is now in consideration for the now leadership team that's at DOT. I don't want to blame this current team that's here, the current leadership, the secretary of the DOT. I don't want to put them in harm's way, or I don't want to blame them for what happened in the past, the sins of the past. I'm going to have to trust that, and I'm going to think that we would want to trust that too, about what happened before will not happen again. And so I want to bring this up, these couple elements up for discussion tonight, because what it says to me is that we have a new team in place. They're telling us the process that they have in place through this document. And I think that we all should consider that and trust that. We've heard so much about it. We did hear some documents that or some policies that maybe didn't exist or maybe weren't adhered to properly. But from what I'm hearing directly from the secretary in my conversations with him, that won't happen again. And that has to be a guarantee that I think that we as a partner in this have to at least consider. Now, they've also agreed to allow us to have a voice in this whole process. The ask tonight is going to be for opening up the document and looking at it and considering it. It is nothing about any proposed provider. It is nothing about the contract. That is something that if it even goes past the look, which is going to come back to us, if it goes past that look, then we have a whole nother dialogue to have happen. So I want to be really clear that wherever this goes tonight, I want to make sure we all understand what we're going to vote for and the whys, and not be sidetracked by some of the comments of the past that I hear, quite frankly, are a little disturbing in that we're saying, or are we saying that we don't trust our partner in this? Our partner being the whole team at DOT. So I would like to open it up for some dialogue right now to get your thoughts on it. How about, did I see over there? Nope. All right, I'll start with Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm aware that there's a diversity of opinion in the room about this. And puts me in a difficult position, frankly. I've been on city council long enough to know why there's a diversity of opinion in the room. We had a bad experience. I don't think that the way things happened the last time inspired a desire to kind of go back there and do that again. And I understand that. So I am cautious myself. We have a good reason to be alert through this process, and the chair has explained the rules and has explained reasons why we should proceed. I would just say there is a kind of an unofficial, if you will, subtext here, again, related to the past and to how the public perceived some of what happened. So in my view, there's a need for us to be cautious, I guess is the way I'll put it. At the same time, we all also heard the briefings about the traffic situation on I-77, about the outlook for traffic on I-77, the tremendous economic implications of that road being available for people to move. And as one who travels on that road regularly, I can tell you, you come to a standstill now at all different hours of the day. So I believe that tonight's decision is about taking a step. It's about whether or not we want to keep open the conversation about the P3, whether we want to get the benefit of the information that's in the unsolicited proposal, or whether we want to just pull the plug. And personally, I think it's premature to think about pulling the plug. I think we need to go further along this route and learn more, get more information before we reach a real conclusion about whether we can proceed with this or not. So I'm relying on the fact that we will have the opportunity to make that decision at a later date. And I regard this particular vote as being about whether or not we get more information before we reach a final conclusion. And on that basis, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we approve.
All right. So as a motion?
It's a motion.
All right, so I guess we have a motion on the floor. Mr. Becker, comment? And a second to that. Very good. All right, so the motion's on the floor to move this forward. All in favor?
You can discuss it
actually,
further.
let's
We've got more discussion.
discuss.
That's what I was asking earlier. All right. All right, so let's go once again. You have a comment. Go ahead.
Thank
I'll
you.
let you.
Thank you so much. As somebody new to these transportation issues, this just being my second CRTPO meeting, I have something of a fresh pair of eyes and a few observations. First of all, the notion of public roads being managed lanes kind of offends me. It offends my sense of basic fairness that some people can whiz by fast in lanes while other people who cannot afford to pay are stuck in slower, more congested lanes. But even more than not liking managed lanes, I'm offended by years of political malpractice by elected officials, which has given rise to managed lanes. The funding crisis for state roads has been foreseeable for decades as cars have been becoming more fuel efficient, thereby generating less revenues from the gas tax. Responsible governance would have demanded that state legislators adopt a different funding model other than the gas tax a long, long, long time ago. And it has shocked me to learn in the last month that I've been on the board, on this board, that as long as 2007, that this corridor that we are now discussing has been slated to be a managed lane. Because I just didn't realize that that was something of the future for public roads. Now I know. That decision was made a long time before my time and probably many of yours. And so the only question for me to grapple with is not whether it will be a managed lane, as Mayor Pappas already explained, but how, who, when, and if it will get built. What I do know is that number one, I do not want our residents to suffer in gridlock any more than is necessary due to the misplaced choices of the past. Number two, telling our residents that they may have to wait upwards of 25 years is a complete and total non-starter. If we go to 2070, as the mayor said, I would be dead. Number three, we must go about this process in a way that is rational, transparent, and understands the broken trust caused by the experience of the I-77 North contract. The only way to go forward then for our residents is with our eyes open, armed with as much information as possible on our options, the options that we do have, learning from the mistakes of the past so we can make the wisest choice for our community. And for that reason, I will be voting yes tonight to conduct a comparative analysis of our options, evaluating risk, financial feasibility, benefit cost, value for money. And thank you.
Well, thank you for that. So now as I scan the room, Mayor Becker.
Not so much to affect our vote here, but for what the people who we serve and who our stakeholders are, what they understand about what we're doing tonight. And I speak to my media partners here, our media partners. Too often I see CRTPO is voting whether or not we're going to have toll lanes on I-77 South. And I think a large swath of our stakeholders in the public still think that that's the decision that's being made. Commissioner Altman has made it really clear, as most of us or all of us know, that isn't the question. It's managed lanes. It's managed lanes, or we go back to the drawing board and we don't know where it's going to be. The question is, will the managed lanes be public-private partnership? Or will they be NCDOT, NCTP, and Turnpike Authority? And I think it's, as long as our stakeholders and our constituents know that, I think it does help with the understanding. We're not voting whether or not to have toll lanes. That's such an important distinction to make. And so having said that, I thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Altman.
Very good. I see hands kind of either withering or whatever. I'm not sure if you want a question or not, so I apologize for feeling like it's rushed, but Dennis, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Pappas. There's so many good points made. You know, clearly we have to do the right thing. And I've mentioned before at this meeting that the one step that I think we're omitting, and that's right before us, is that, and this may be unusual, I don't know if this has happened before, but the provider before us with the unsolicited bid is a current provider where we have a track record, financial track record. So my question has always been, how is this a good deal for taxpayers? How much has the current provider put into the contract, the work, and how much have taxpayers put in, i.e. the backstop? So I think there's a quick overview that would make me more comfortable if we knew that from a financial standpoint, this works, because clearly it works for the provider. They're back to the table. And I'm all for putting aside the past, but I think we should also learn with a current provider how this could play out, especially as this provider goes to the Final Four, if you will, for a basketball analogy.
Again, good comments, because that's part of what we're here for, is to understand all of those reasons why. But as we all know, and I'll get to it in a second, John, this is something that we're considering. If we don't look, we won't know those things. And so we want to make sure that that's part of the process as we go forward. Once we open that box, what does it present? And then those questions come up again.
But just a clarification, Chair. I'm suggesting that we have that information, and it very well could be public information that we could take a quick look at to understand, is NCDOT satisfied with the current financial results? And are they aligned with what that original proposal was? So we have the information before us.
And I think that we're close to that, but I'm going to go to John first over here. John, if you can go ahead.
Yeah, my concern with this vote tonight is that we're marching towards a predetermined conclusion. And I think it's a false choice to say we can do this or we got to wait till 2070. I don't think that's our only options. There are other options. We need to be innovative. This group should be pressing, again, I'll say it again, the legislature, the people that spoke before us tonight that were in favor of of moving forward with managed lanes should be pressing our legislature. There has to be another alternative. If our alternative is we do this, or we wait to 2070, I mean, there's no choice there. So I absolutely cannot support moving forward with this provider. You know, I was around 10 years ago. I saw what happened in the previous contract. Quite frankly, I don't have trust with this provider.
And again, we're not talking about the provider tonight. I want to make that as abundantly clear as Mayor Becker's statement. We're not talking about the provider. We're talking about basically taking a look.
So on our agenda, it says that this will be a decision about the unsolicited proposal.
That's correct.
And I know who that provider is, and I think we all
It's
do.
the proposal itself.
Okay.
Now, what
Wow.
happens to that after is, again, in the policy that the state has, and David Roy, I saw you in the room over here. You want to kind of better explain it than I could as far as the policy goes and what happens next? Because I want to make perfectly clear that we understand that. David, as you remember, presented to us before, he's with DOT.
Hey, good evening. David Roy, I'm with the North Carolina Turnpike Authority. Again, I believe as the chair indicated, if this process were to move forward ultimately to a P3 procurement, that procurement would be a fair, competitive, and open process, regardless of any unsolicited proposal that has been received. The ultimate award would be based on responses to an RFP put out by the department, and there's no benefit in that process. There's no extra points added to a score, anything like, they don't start with 5 points at the beginning.
I thought they were on the short list.
If
Is that not an advantage?
if the
Let's define
unsolicited
the short list.
if the unsolicited proposal is reviewed and accepted, and by accepted, it's determined that it meets the criteria within the department's policy, that respondent would be shortlisted should it move forward to a procurement. What that really means, what we're talking about here is a short list really means if respondents propose and they're qualified and provide a detailed response to the statements of qualifications, there's no predetermined list of number of firms that are shortlisted. So the department could elect to shortlist 3, 4, 5 firms. So if the department receives qualified responses, they're going to shortlist those respondents. So I don't want to give the perception that shortlisting somehow, if we're using someone used their basketball reference, this doesn't allow a basketball team to go straight to the Final Four. It is a encouragement, incitement for firms to bring innovative ideas to the department, but it is in no way a determination on who ultimately is awarded the project if it moves forward.
Mayor Becker.
I have a specific question for Mr. Roy. In light of Commissioner Bilodeau's concerns or his ask, would an evaluation of the financial viability and success of the current project and of the type of project that's before us, would that be part of your considerations if you undertake this review?
Yeah, so and I believe what the proposed resolution says and what we've talked about back in the October meeting, the department, if it requested, the department would conduct not just an analysis of the unsolicited proposal, but a comparative analysis of a potential P3 delivery alternative compared to, it's termed a public sector comparator, what the department or the Turnpike Authority could deliver apart from a P3. So that is the bulk of the work that would be done if this board requests the department to move forward. It would be a comparative analysis looking at a Turnpike delivered project versus a potential P3 delivered project.
Including financial viability either way of the overall project and of the concept.
That's correct. Risk allocation, cost benefit analysis, value for money, an entire look at what a P3 delivery option might look like compared to a Turnpike delivered project.
Ed?
I think Mayor Higdon makes a good point. If you look at the document, it says request for a decision about the unsolicited proposal. Down below in the background, it says if the action is approved, that NCDOT commits to the following next steps. So I just wanted to clarify, my motion was for the itemized background pieces there and not the specific wording of the action requested above. I think we need to be clear that the action requested is that they will perform the initial screening and conduct the comparative analysis and form a working group. And that's the thing that I'm prepared to go to the next step with and make the motion for.
As a seconder, I understood that to be the case, Councilman.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree with you on that.
Chuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, excuse me. Trying to get over this sinus thing I've had for a few weeks, thanks to grandchildren. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and thank you for your service to the Turnpike Authority. I have a question for you about process. I see in our policy that is talking about a one-step process or a two-step process. Can you talk about the distinction of those, and are we implementing just one step or are we doing both steps? So first of all, would the RFQ actually start to identify some of the things that Commissioner Billadu has raised? Would that come out during that RFQ process, or are we going directly to an RFP type?
That's correct. The intent would be to issue a statement of qualifications, receive those qualifications, shortlist, and then move to an RFP.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I have the floor, I just wanted to say thank you for your dedication to actually putting so much time and energy into actually understanding how complicated of a decision this is tonight. As the former mayor of Cornelius, which I've told you before, I lived through that first decision to go forward with the managed lanes on 77. I do think our community has benefited from it, but I do also understand that there were mistakes made along the way. Part of it was the lack of public discussion and actually putting this out before all of our constituents and actually encouraging conversations like this. What I really appreciate tonight is that we had three speakers that represented three different segments that I think really can be impacted by this. One, a realtor and a development community person speaking. We had a large business owner that employs thousands of people in our community. And then to have a partner from across the state line come and speak. And really what they all said consistently was, please move forward and gather more information. The thing that we heard tonight from Rob, which I appreciate Rob saying this tonight, is that we didn't have enough information to actually make a decision about a $6.5 million decision. It's really about information. And without having the information, you really can't make the decision in a competent way, whether we should move forward with a P3 partner or without a P3 partner. So this is what I'm encouraging you tonight, is to think of it as gathering information so that you as an elected person can represent your community the best and make the best decision moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to point of clarification on page 12 of the document provided to us by the chair. It does say by virtue of providing an unsolicited proposal, the proposer will be included on the list of shortlisted proposers. So that is, in a sense, what Mayor Hegnan was saying. I mean, that's a free pass to the, we'll go back to the basketball analogy, the Final Four. I mean, that's right there in the black and white of the document that we've been given. So to say that they're not shortlisted is either inaccurate or this document is out of date and needs to be updated. I'd also like just to point out, we did hear from a developer saying they like to see more the managed lanes. We call them managed lanes. We heard from a company that lies both in South Carolina and North Carolina. Another one has some headquarters up here. What we haven't heard from is South Carolina. I mean, are they going to have a managed lane project at the border that connects it to make it easier to get over to Carowinds? Because I go down there, not to Carowinds, but to Frugal. And I mean, it's still on a Saturday or any day of the week. You go down there, it's tough getting off that exit. And it's more difficult coming back up north, managing over in that roadway. And I did work down in further down in South Carolina and Richburg for a number of years. And coming home at night or in the morning, because it was swing shift type work, I backed up more so in South Carolina than I did in North Carolina. Yeah, so if we're gonna talk about potential partners, I think maybe NCDOT should grab CDOT or SDOT, whatever they call themselves down there, and say, hey, are you guys on board with this too? Because this is gonna impact you as much as it's gonna impact us. You know, and I appreciate the business owners coming and talking and speaking to us. I think that's important that we have individuals from our business community on these subjects. But I also, and I would say to them, talk to your hourly workers. And are they going to be on those roads, or are you just looking at the customers? So I heard tonight, you know, this is gonna help with getting qualified individuals to come work for us, and freight and things like that. And the 77 north lanes, 18 wheelers aren't allowed on them. They're not built big enough or better, deep enough. They're not being utilized by freight. So we're not moving freight up and down these toll roads or managed lanes. So it's not going to impact your business that way. I do, and just to be clear, I do agree. Gathering more information is excellent. We have to, we need it. But there, you know, there is, and I hate to say it, Chair Pappas, there's history, and history is hard to forget. You know, if I took my car to a mechanic and they didn't fix it right, I would be reluctant to go back to that mechanic again, even if my best friend said, you know what, they've gotten better. Didn't do it right the first time, I would be reluctant. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I just want to make sure again that we're all on the same page when we understand what shortlisted is. I hear that, and I want to make sure that we understand that shortlist, as Mr. Roy said, is not a place of advantage. It's a place on a list. And so if there are, and I've also struggled with the language of some of this stuff. I don't even like the words unsolicited proposal because it sounds like an invasion, but it's actually part of the policy and the language in the policy. So when we talk about shortlist, it's probably not much different than if I'm a hiring authority or hiring for my company, and I ask my people to give me a list, a short list of candidates. Now I'm going to choose the successful candidate from one of those lists. So I just really want to make sure that we are very, very crystal clear on what shortlisted means for the sake of all of us. And I want to make very sure that we're understanding that this is just a look at the proposal that somebody set in. That's the policy that we're following here that I see anyway. And I think that Mr. Roy has also explained this is a policy that's in place and we're following it. So I will now go to Renee. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank the business members who did speak today. I think they bring an important perspective to our board. I hope that they too will go to the legislature and talk to the General Assembly and see if we can get maybe a different starting point on this conversation where we can be productive outside of this public-private partnership. I think that I'll speak for myself and my feelings through this whole process and say that as we've been speaking against working through a public-private partnership, we have also been asking to talk to the Turnpike Authority about finding ways of moving forward. And I haven't seen any movement with that. I've just seen movement here with the public-private partnership. I don't think shortlisted is the word, the sticking point for me, or the word that I keep going back to. You said that the public-private partnership proposal sets the terms of what we'll be looking at. And so in my mind, not being somebody who watches or participates in sports, they are not going to the Final Four. They are creating the playing field. We are just the players that are kicking the ball and seeing where it goes. And speaking to the point of managed lanes, I do want to touch on that a little bit. I-77 has a history. It was created as part of an Eisenhower program, written into that program. And this is why I keep asking about environmental justice, was a purpose of removing blight from urban areas. That's why we have I-77 today, is because our federal government would pump money into urban areas and pave over Black neighborhoods. And we still see the residue of that today. If you look at the Mecklenburg County Quality of Life Explorer, you see that some of the poorest areas in Mecklenburg County are along I-77. It impacts the schools, some of the least attended schools, some of the schools with the worst attendance records are closest to I-77. We are not serving the people who live along I-77 by looking at this proposal. When we look at public-private partnerships, we are looking at a toll rate 4 times the amount of what the Turnpike Authority charges. I don't live along I-77. I live in Matthews, and my husband commutes to Troutman every day, or every other day, I should say. If we could afford the toll lanes on 77, we would pay $300 a month out of our paycheck. That's a choice between our grocery bill or him getting to work. That's what we were talking about. Entering into steering our van towards this public-private partnership is making it more expensive for the workers at the bottom end of the wages to make it to these jobs that are vital to our economic prosperity of Mecklenburg County. So those are the points that I am concentrating on. I wish that I kept hearing more about partnering with our business community, partnering with everybody around the table, and going to the General Assembly to talk about making this a viable turnpike project where my husband and the people along 77 would have access to those travel lanes. Because if we approve this public-private partnership, the people who have access to the travel lanes are not the people who live closest to that road.
Mr. Roy, I know you'd like to address.
And
that.
maybe I can just touch on a couple points there, if I may. It is true that if the department reviewed the proposal that was received, it could help inform what a potential future P3 project would look like, but those terms would not be set or dictated by any proposal that has been received. What the ultimate project and procurement would look like would be set by the department in close coordination with this board and all of our partners. Not, the unsolicited proposal is not copy paste. This is what would be in any kind of future procurement. It could help inform if there are innovative ideas that the proposer presented a future P3 procurement, but it in no way dictates the terms of what the department would ultimately advertise for. And then
Before you go on, could I ask you to clarify that a little bit more? Because when it was explained to us, it was that this is the starting point. This is the conversation that we are looking at, that the P3 partner has written many pages of a proposal, and that is why they get shortlisted. And that proposal sort of sets the goalpost for what we're looking at least now, maybe not at the end, but what we're looking at now.
It certainly helps inform the process, but it in no way, again, would dictate what would be ultimately procured. And certainly even in the comparative analysis, the department through its partners would look to determine what would be best for this project in this region, not just because it was in a 20-page unsolicited proposal. And I think the other thing, if I just may, part of this process, I think there was touched on the Turnpike Authority. Obviously, I am with the Turnpike Authority. Part of this process would be not just to look at a potential P3 delivery option. It would be to say, okay, what can the Turnpike do? And I can assure you, we will do everything in our power to bring innovative solutions to the table. And if it is possible, and that's the will of this board, to deliver it through the Turnpike Authority, it is not channeling it to a P3 process. Like we do with all proposed Turnpike projects, and I think Mayor Travis can attest, we look for innovative solutions all the time for all of our toll projects, and this would be no different.
And I would like to say, I appreciate that. I was speaking for the process as it has been so far, certainly not about your work or what NCDOT has done. But as we've had this discussion, we have brought up numerous times, working collectively to go to the state and find a way to make this a Turnpike project. And I personally, from where I sit, which is in a very limited scope, have not seen action moving towards that. I have seen action moving towards this P3 process. So that it was in no way to slight you or what you were saying today. It was,
And certainly the P3 discussion has brought this in front of this board and to the forefront, but a lot of work has been going on and continues to go on behind the scenes to deliver this project. Right now, it is U5718. It is a tolled managed lanes project, and we're approaching it as such.
thank you. I appreciate that. But I would like to continue to urge this board to push more aggressively to turn it away from a P3 project and see what we can do to make it a turnpike project so that it remains an affordable, viable option for many people, not just the top wage earners in the area.
Comment?
So for one, I think that's an extremely difficult path. I mean, we have an STI, we have the STIPs, we have laws that were passed to govern, and what that would mean is we're going in and saying, please set that aside and send some more money to Charlotte. And frankly, as a representative of Charlotte in Raleigh, I think that's a difficult question to ask. But the other thing I wanted to clarify is the managed lane structure creates a new revenue source, which is optional. So the people who choose to use it go there, they pay. That frees up $2 billion from our highway fund. That's money that can either go back to taxpayers or more likely it will get diverted to other uses. So it's not like a double count or anything like that. And also the people who choose to use the managed lanes free up capacity on the free lanes and make life a little easier for the people who are there. So everybody participates in the benefits from it. But the notion that you're creating a new revenue stream from people who choose to pay is essentially what this is all about. Because if we go back and say, hey, please relax the corridor cap or find some other money, you're going to create chaos in the state's highway funding.
I think there's already chaos on the state's highway funding.
I don't disagree with that.
You know, I also think we were sitting at a table full of determined people that could find a way to make something that makes a little more sense to me. I understand that we'll disagree on it. This is my point. This is my place to say my opinion on it. My catching point here is that as a turnpike project, it would be significantly more affordable to a greater amount of people in the community to use a managed lane than it is as a public-private partnership project. Right now, and with the company that has brought it to us, the money is going back to Spain. It's not staying here with us. I think, you know, that continues to be my sticking point, is that as a turnpike project, it serves the public in a wider capacity than it does as a private project. And to increase the cost of transportation for a corridor, for one of the poorest corridors in Mecklenburg County, does not serve the people who need to get to work at minimum wage jobs. And those are the people that are working at Starbucks in Huntersville or Starbucks in Matthews for that reason. You know, my husband works for Lowe's and we love Lowe's, and I would not change that for anything. But a $300 bill added to our bills every month, you know, I think people think politicians are all rich, and I'm sitting here and we are at our, I keep saying this in our council meetings when we're looking at housing, we are at 65% AMI. That's not the poorest in Mecklenburg County. The poorest in Mecklenburg County, $300 a month, you know, is could be an entire paycheck. I mean, it's, you know, that's a significant amount. And that's, I think in my heart, that's where our consideration should be.
Okay, we'll stay focused on that. I saw Chuck's hand up first, so I'm going to go over there. Then I'll go up to James up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Renee, I appreciate your perspective. I really do. But the thing that you have to add into that is the corridor cap discussion and how long that would extend this entire project out for X number of years. And so, David, I don't know if you want to talk about the corridor cap and what the impact of that will be for this entire project versus if it's a P3 project, it's a project that's undertaken all at one time from a,
I mean, I for one don't need to hear that. We've heard this a
but
number
it's
of
but it's a
times.
real thing. It's
I
a
know,
real-
I understand that. I do. We just keep moving forward with this P3 without the same parallel amount of energy.
I'm not
into-
saying you're wrong. I'm
Okay.
just saying that it has to be a part of the conversation.
And it can be. I am personally saying, I wish we were putting as much energy into looking into other approaches as we are partnering with this company
Don't disagree.
that's based in Spain, that's based in Spain.
Okay. I'm going to move up to James.
Call for question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Woody.
Question.
Call the question.
Call for question.
Okay. I've not had that before. Sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, we vote on whether or not we now terminate the discussion. Question has been called. I've seconded the call. So now the body will vote on whether or not we end the discussion. at this point.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry, the motions.
Had my hand up. I have not had an
Right,
opportunity to
and
speak.
like I say, I don't know that I would do that right now since I have some comment requests here and Mayor Knox as well. Let me drop back before we go that. Can we back out of that? Is that? your-
Sir, the idea about calling the question is, yes, there are more people who want to speak. Somebody suggests that we've probably discussed it enough. So the group decides whether or not we continue the discussion or and by a majority vote. And I think a simple majority on this one.
Okay,
So if I may.
you may,
suggest,
absolutely,
yeah,
that's fine.
to suggest it. So the question has been called, and therefore could the group, if you agree to stop this discussion at this point, raise your hand. And if you don't agree and you feel that we should hear more comments, don't raise your hand. Everybody clear? So,
Clear enough for us?
okay, I think that's pretty clear. So let's continue.
All right.
Thank you.
Rusty, please go.
So I've heard a lot of stuff tonight and I've just kind of made some notes. When you talk about each solicitation and how it's treated, as far as the financial implications to the state, as far as environmental impacts, as far as contributing to quality of life, as far as the financial stability of the solicitor. We know a lot of history there. We've heard about fair and open process. And I'll go back to the basketball analogy if we want to go Final Four. The last time around, I believe we did an RFP and we had one vendor, one proposal. And so we handed the trophy to that vendor that day. This time, we've got an unsolicited proposal from the same vendor, and I will put my money on Final Four being this is the only vendor that comes to the table at the end of the day when an RFP is let. I look at this, as Renee said, about the fact that this is a foreign entity. What kind of contribution is there made to the state? I've brought up several times the corridor cap, which is bothersome for me. I would like to say I understand it. I don't. And I don't know that I might just be that old dog and you cannot beat the understanding into me about a corridor cap for a $2.1 billion project. And you got to say, we cap it at 650 million. So I got $1.5 billion deficit. And based on the current funding model the state has, the only way we can do this project, I'm not denying we need this. The only way we can do it is on a P3. Getting more information, we don't need more information. We have the information. You can see it physically if you want to go out there. But we've heard the reports about traffic patterns, when the peak times are, AM and PM. We know what it's like. We've heard from business people in South Charlotte corridor that have talked about how it backs up. We've got that information. So I've just got to say, in looking at this, where we're at right now with this vendor, Are we looking at a short list? Or are we just being short-sighted? That's it.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Pappas. Just to comment on Councilmember Garner's questions and of, do we want to go to we need to go to Raleigh and continue to ask for money. I agree. As I read it here, that number 2 point on here of what we're asking for NCDOT to do is to give us data about the P3 delivery or traditional through the traditional toll project. We can't go to Raleigh unless we have facts. If we don't have the facts, this is to me, a fact-finding mission of give me the numbers, give me the facts that I can go to Raleigh, that we can all pull together, go to Raleigh and talk to them about, this is the difference and this is the impact. And to your point of, here's the impact of, are you going to pay $3.35 for a section of 2 mile to go on 77, or can you get a traditional toll at 35 cents? And what is the impact? So when you talk about that, I agree, I'm with you, that something does have to change in Raleigh. It's not going to change overnight, but I can't go there and go, well, I need you to change this because I live on the north end of 77 and I don't even look at my toll lane bill. It just automatically gets paid. And I honestly, I don't want to know, but time is money. And unfortunately, I have to calculate that in my job. But to your point, I get it. I'm with you. If we don't do anything but sit around here and talk about it and kick it down the can because nobody has guts enough to say, I'm going to raise my hand and say, yes, I want more information, except Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, we're going to still be talking about this in 10 years. I've been part of this organization for nearly 10 years, and we've been talking about this for that much time. So I'm with you that we've talked it to death. If we don't have facts to find some other alternatives, then an unsolicited proposal that they may be a short list or they not, who knows? My question for you though is, as we talk about the next steps, you go through all of this, if we decide to do this tonight, at what point does that contract come back to us or the RFP come back to us to look at? What else does this board get to look at? Can you tell us that, Brian?
Again, as I think we kind of outlined the process back in October, the first step would be obviously this comparative analysis. And we would be back before this body with the results of that analysis for further consideration. At that point, we would be requesting additional action from CRTPO to make a determination if the CRTPO would like the department to move forward with a P3 procurement. So the next step is, if requested, the department will conduct a comparative analysis, look at the unsolicited proposal, and come back to this body with more information before it would be determined to move forward to P3 procurement.
Thank you.
All right, on the horn, we have beat it up. David.
Smart people in the room, so I'm learning. I actually come here, I didn't know how I'd vote on this. Really, I didn't. And I think there's probably some other people in the room that might have come here thinking the same thing. How are we going to vote on this? And I listened, and I'm kind of glad we carried on this conversation because it showed me that people here in the room were interested in listening to more about what you got to say. I kind of feel like what we do here is we kind of represent the CRTP. We kind of want to do what's good. And I come here with wanting to vote for this. But I hear the facts, and something that John had said in a meeting several months ago is that the toll roads and my son lives up on exit 28, and I live right off the toll road. The Monroe bypass runs right through my neighborhood, and I can get on that for about what it costs to go one exit on 77. And I think about that a lot. And I actually go down 77 when I'm working. And when I'm working, I don't think about it so much because my company pays for the toll. So I kind of do it and move on. But if I had to pay for that every day, you're talking, like you say, $300. That's a lot of money for someone to think. And then Mr. Diggs had said in the last meeting that you sit in that traffic and you sit there and you want to go because, listen, I travel. So if you're traveling a long way, I could travel from Atlanta and come to Charlotte, and I've been driving for 3.5, 4 hours, and I sit in Charlotte traffic for another hour and a half or an hour. I'm going to probably, I'm going to try to pay and just go because I want to get home and see my family. But I'm actually really torn between what's the right thing to do. And I guess my question is if we do go ahead with this process and vote yes on it, and I agree, how do we put pressure? Because we should do all we can do to not have a private company in Spain that we're paying 200% more to drive on that road. I like the idea. I like the idea when you go and you throw a quarter. Remember when we threw a quarter in the basket, or we move on, or even if you threw $1 in the basket now, or $1.50 in the basket, or I know we don't use baskets anymore, but it shows my age, I guess. But anyway, it's a tough decision, and I'd like to see us, if we vote yes on it, really put you, and something Ms. Quarles said, we need the facts. Why don't we take these facts and really push our legislature in Raleigh? These are the facts. The facts are, you're very correct. I grew up in Charlotte. I know the schools. I played football at those schools and stuff that you go down 77. I grew up in West Charlotte. So I know all those. It's not the same as going through Cornelius, and people can afford it more up there. People won't be able to afford it as much on that end of town unless you're, going to Carowinds or wherever you want to go. So it's a tough decision. It really is. But I would love to see us, if we do vote yes, and I want to vote yes for it, but I also want us to put a lot of pressure on our legislature, because it's just not right. It's not right that we have to pay that. And, if we can afford it and we don't care about the people who can't afford it, shame on us for doing that. And I mean that with all, and like I said, I appreciate all your comments, and I appreciate how smart all of you are. And I sit here and listen, but I think we need to work maybe a different angle. And how do we vote yes, but then take the facts to Raleigh and say, why do we have to pay this when let's change the rules? Let's get the money and let's change the rules. If that makes any sense, I don't know. So I'm done.
I've got an additional comment as I'm listening to the comments as well. I mean, I don't want it to be confused here, the difference between a toll lane that everybody who gets on that roadway pays versus a managed lane, which those who choose to use that lane, they're the ones that pay.
Well, I understand that. I do understand the difference.
And
in
I do
lane
want to
and
make
toll lane,
that
but
clear for everybody.
And I'm sorry if I did confuse that, but again, the money is what I was talking about more so than anything else.
And I think, invalid point. I mean, a lot of people that come to me say, well, I don't want toll lanes. Well, it's not a toll lane. I think when you go to like Virginia or something, you pay a toll lane, you will not get beyond that gate until you pay that toll. You don't have another choice. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this is choice.
But how many people would have actually been in favor of it if they knew that they were going to pay $4 to go one exit on 77 North? I mean, I think that was kind of unimaginable. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, we knew. Yeah, it was clearly talked about the cost of utilizing the managed lanes. And at one point, someone said, it could cost up to $10 to go 1 mile. And yeah, it could. That was the answer. So, but I do have to say, Mr. Cohn, you are right. Cornelius can't afford it. Just kidding.
Ed, you had a comment again.
I just wanted to echo what you said, Mr. Chair. You don't have to pay anything. You can drive for free, right? On a toll lane, everybody pays. The people who choose to pay more to cover the cost of the road because there aren't as many of them. So you have two classes. You have those who pay and those who don't pay on a managed lane environment. On a toll environment, everybody pays. And because everybody pays, the number can be smaller that everybody has to pay than the amount that's payable by the people that choose. But the point is you can drive for free. So I think for low income people, the fact that you still have that costless option is of more value than a low cost, but you have to pay kind of road. I mean, we can disagree about that, but I just want to be clear, those prices are not applicable to everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Roy.
And if I just may quickly, and not speaking directly for toll pricing on 77 North, but one of the purposes of a managed lane is to ensure travel time reliability. And there's actually a requirement for any entity operating a managed lane to maintain a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. So that is certainly part of the driving factor of the prices that are charged on managed lanes compared to what you might see on a traditional toll facility like the Monroe Expressway. It's a factor of supply and demand. So if more vehicles are in the managed lanes, those prices have to go up so they can maintain a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. And that's not directly related to 77 North. That's across the country and a federal requirement.
I hate to interject, but it
Yes,
cost
sir.
me $8 to drive here and I did 80 miles an hour the whole way down here to toll lanes. So it's not necessarily about regulating traffic.
Was that legal?
Only for Rusty.
All right. We've had a lot of conversation in here tonight. I think that we still have a motion on the floor, though. Okay, I'm gonna ask then if there's no other comments, I'm gonna call for a vote. So all in favor? Aye. I'll let Neil catch up to this. Thank you for raising your hands.
It might be easier if we could do all opposed, and I'll note that first, if
Okay.
that's okay. I'm sorry.
All right, so now we know what that is. So we have that. So we'll go to oppose then. All opposed?
I have in opposition, Town of Matthews. I have MTC in opposition. I have Pineville. Huntersville. Cornelius, Davidson. Indian Trail. Any other municipalities I didn't call? Okay. So the motion again was to authorize NCDOT to perform initial screening to conduct a comparative analysis, and that motion carries.
All right. One of the things I want to say about the whole process is the ability for us to have this conversation. Even though we do all have different opinions on where it is, I got to tell you, this is a lot of dialogue, even though that I never had before me the call for question. So sorry about that. I don't have that big of a board. So I appreciate all the effort and the energy that everybody has put into the dialogue. So I want to say thank you for that. All right, the motion is carried. We'll move on if I can.
Which people
I'll
don't
find
like,
after all this, my
it's-
agenda.
But then again, they pay.
All right, Mr. Burke, you're up.
They have the.
Thank you. So
population.
the March 15th board meeting,
But it was
we will have an education session beginning at 6 o'clock. This will be on the memorandum of understanding renegotiation process associated with the 2020 urban area census data release. And then in terms of the agenda for the March 15th board meeting, we'll go into that after the education session. But we will have a member of CAT staff come back and provide additional information regarding the electric vehicle charger component with the project applications. And we will put the discretionary projects back on for approval at the March 15th meeting. Also for action, we will have consideration to approve the FY 2024 Unified Planning Work Program and FY 23 self-certification. We'll have the approval to open a public comment period on the draft tip. And then we'll have the approval of the formation of the CRTPO Transit Providers Working Group. And then just a few upcoming issues to make everyone aware of. You all should have received an electronic e-blast invitation from me to attend the CRTPO celebration on March 15th. This will be before the board meeting starts at 6 o'clock. The hours for this are 4:30 to 5:45. It'll be downstairs in the lobby. Purpose again is to celebrate all of your service on the board, but also as well as your jurisdiction's commitment to the CRTPO in our planning efforts over the past several years. So again, March 15th, please RSVP by clicking the link for the CRTPO celebration. And then annual street cleanup event this spring. Augustine Rodriguez sent a doodle poll last week. If you'd like to join us, please indicate your availability by completing the doodle poll. And then last reminder is the ethics filing for statements of economic interest and real estate disclosure must be filed by all voting members by April 17th. I checked this morning, there are only 7 of the 45 voting members. So I would ask you all to take some time and do that. It only takes about 20 minutes. Suzanne Singh is our ethics liaison. She'll help you fill that out. She's very helpful. So just contact me if you need her information. And I lied. I do have one more upcoming issue, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer for a quick update on our RAISE grant through IIJ.
Grab a microphone.
Hi, so last year we applied for a RAISE grant for traffic safety and Vision Zero in our planning area. Unfortunately, we were not successful. We scored very well, but the competition was very strict. This year we are trying again. We are including more data. Staff is actually writing it instead of getting a consultant. So I feel like it's a pretty strong effort. We will be reaching out to you for letters of support. Neil will send out an email with an example letter that hopefully you can just go ahead and edit and send back to us or send directly to government grant.gov. So you'll have that email address. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Neil, you've covered all your stuff?
Yes,
You sure?
I think so.
All right. If there's any comments, I know it's late tonight, any comments for the good of the group? Mayor Becker, did I see your hand go up? No, you're just waving. You want to go home. So, all right, so I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn then.
So move.
All right, we're out of here. Thank you.
I got a couple. Stand up and leave. Got a couple of